Today we're kicking off our NHL season previews for the 22-23 season, and we're starting with teams in the Atlantic Division. Today we're previewing the 22-23 season for the Montreal Canadiens. We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're kicking off our season previews. We're going to go division by division this time. Sometimes doing things alphabetically just gets a little dull, a little boring. I like to change things up and do teams in different orders. So this time around, we're going to go one division at a time. And as you can see, we're going to kind of talk through here teams that I feel are different spots of the division kind of lumped together that are more similar. Today we're starting with Montreal. So how we're going to organize these videos is we're going to quickly recap last year, just take a look at it quickly at how things went. And then we're going to take a look at any significant changes that happened last season. So key additions, key subtractions, take a look at their prospects, who might be able to jump into the lineup this year and make an impact. And then we're going to take a look at what we're projecting to be their current roster and lineup for opening night, and talk a little bit about how we think things are going to go for the current season, any top questions facing the team, that kind of thing going into the year. So first up, let's quickly recap last season. Of course, we know Montreal was dead last in the NHL. It was not a good season for them, but they did end up with the first overall draft selection, which certainly, hopefully long-term will benefit them greatly. They finished with a record of 22, 49, and 11 for 55 points. They scored 221 goals while giving up 319. Goals for was 27th. Goals against was dead last. So certainly, like I said, lots to not be happy about there. The power play only kicked in at 13.7%, was second last, and the PK was 75.6 for 27th. So overall, there really wasn't a whole lot to like from a team stat perspective. The numbers were fairly ugly. There was obviously a few bright spots on any team that was, not great. That always seems to take place. Always seems to happen. You saw a coaching change partway through the year. You saw Dominic Dufour be dismissed. You saw, of course, general manager Marc Bergevin be dismissed. A new regime come in with Jeff Gorton. Then he hired Ken Hughes to be the GM, with Jeff Gorton overseeing things as the VP. And then, of course, Marty St. Louis came in towards the end of the year to replace Ducharme as head coach. He ended up with a record of 14, 19, and 4, which may not sound like an awesome record, but it was a heck of a lot better than they were performing prior to his arrival. And we saw an invigorated team under St. Louis. We saw a team that was a little looser, a little bit more offensive. Some key players like Cole Caulfield, who struggled mightily under the previous coach and the previous way they were doing things, really caught fire. And obviously a lot of people thought Cole Caulfield would contend for the Calder Trophy last year, be one of the top rookie scorers, if not the top rookie scorer, and he was anything but. But his end of season really was what we expected all season long. So Marty St. Louis obviously helped bring that out in him. So certainly some optimism going forward into the offseason for sure. And we've seen a fair bit of change. We've used the word rebuild around this team a fair bit. It seems like some around the organization don't really want to call it that anymore. But to me, it still basically is. I think to me, the word rebuild for some organizations, some franchises, some fan bases seems to be an ugly word that they don't want to hear. But to me, rebuild can mean different things, and there's different types of rebuild. Some are really deep and right down to the core, like you're seeing in Chicago, for example. Other rebuilds are, a little bit quicker. It's the type of thing where you see some significant change, but it's not like you're completely stripping it down. They can sometimes use like the word retool, but really they're all kind of rebuilds. Montreal's going through a significant transition and changing period here right now, and let's take a look at all those changes that we've seen this offseason. And to be honest, I wouldn't be shocked by the time I record this video and the time the season starts that there could be even a few more. But take a looking at the key subtractions. Now, I've added Carey Price to this list, of course, with an asterisk, meaning that he's not expected to play this year. His contract's going on long-term injury reserve. It's already on the offseason LTIR, so he's definitely not playing. There's just no way that he's going to be able to be healthy. And at this point, there'd be no way they could activate him, at least based on their current cap situation. There's a really good chance that Carey Price's career is over, although the team, the player, everybody involved, it feels like it's still early and reluctant to actually say that. Obviously, he missed the bulk of last year. He's going to miss this year. As time goes on, the more time you miss, the more surgeries you have. It does get that much more challenging and much more unlikely that you'll make a return, but that's where things stand. So Carey Price will not be on the ice with the team this year. Jeff Petrie was traded, the longtime puck-moving right-shot defenseman. It's a bit of a surprise, but young defenseman Alexander Romanov was traded as well. He's on now with the New York Islanders. Of course, they were able to bring in Kirby Dach in that trade. They traded Ryan Poehling, Tyler Pitlick, Cale Clegg's not with the team, Sammy Niku, and of course Matthew Perreault was a UFA and who has since retired. But some pretty substantial movement there. Of course, Poehling went along with Jeff Petrie into the Pittsburgh Penguins in a trade. Romanov is now with the Islanders, and the other players, of course, are in different spots, and some of which are not even in the NHL or still looking for work. On the addition side, though, they did bring in some good players that will be interesting to see how they fare with the Montreal Canadiens, including Evgeny Dodonov, who they picked up, of course, from the Vegas Golden Knights. Kirby Dach, who came over from Chicago in that trade, of course, which ended up sending Romanov to the Islanders. It was basically a three-way deal. But essentially, Romanov goes to the Islanders for their first-round pick, and then that pick is flipped to Chicago for Kirby Dach. They were able to get Mike Matheson, a pretty solid defenseman, native Montrealer, somebody who's a good character guy. They come back in a Jeff Petrie trade. That was a bit surprising. I wasn't sure that the Montreal Canadiens were going to take on much of a salary or anything coming back given their situation with the Jeff Petrie situation, but Matheson is a good add in that sense. They picked up Sean Monahan from Calgary for basically nothing. Of course, he's trying to resurrect his career after a couple of injury-plagued seasons, a couple of hip surgeries down to the final year of his deal, trying to see if he can resurrect things. Pretty low-risk situation for getting a sweetener, I guess you could say, to add Monahan to their lineup. And, of course, they've also added Madison Bowie as well as a signing. Now, so that's your additions. That's your subtraction. So lots of players out, lots of players in. Are they a better team? Are they a weaker team? What's the status? It's really difficult to say. I think a lot of it's going to boil down to coaching, and obviously to a degree, some of these players on the ice is going to be interesting to see how they fare. Now, do they have any prospects that we can expect to inject some more youth into this lineup? We know they have a few young players that are important on the team. They just named Nick Suzuki captain, the 23-year-old top center on the team, into a long-term deal. You've got Cole Caulfield, obviously a little bit younger than Suzuki, coming off like I said, a real strong finish to his first full NHL season. Will be interesting to see a full year under Marty St. Louis, how things go for him. Him and Suzuki have good chemistry. I expect them to be line mates for a long time. And of course, there's a few others as well. But who else is going to jump into that lineup? Of course, you get first overall pick Juraj Slafkovsky. I do expect Slafkovsky to get some games. It's difficult to say if he sticks and plays a full season or not. He does appear to be very mature physically. Obviously, a real strong player as well. There's going to be, definitely an adaptation to the North American game. There's no doubt. But I've heard comments from Hughes and Gorton indicating that they at the very least want to get him in the lineup for at least a sample of games to see how things go. I don't know that they're going to rush this guy. We've seen a lot of Habs prospects in the past, in my opinion at least, be rushed and have their development completely impacted. There's a few examples you can think of. Alex Galchenyuk comes to mind, and others. And I don't know that they really want to go down that road, especially, to be honest, I don't think that they expect the Montreal Canadiens to be, a real competitive team this year. I do expect them to be better than last year. I don't know that they're going to be a team that's going to be battling for playoffs. So I'm not sure that some of these rookies, it makes sense to give them a ton of time and to put them through that. I definitely think they'll get a sample, a sniff, and then maybe at the end of the year, if they're eliminated from the playoffs, which quite often when you see more youngsters get opportunities, then I'd say that there's less pressure and it seems to be better opportunities. But Slafkovsky is definitely going to get an opportunity. There's no doubt. I'm just not entirely convinced, at least as of yet, that he'll play a full season, but we'll see how training camp goes. He's going to be in the rookie showcase coming up here this week. And then, of course, he'll get some games, preseason games, and we'll see. I mean, it could happen. I just don't want to set the expectation. I think he's absolutely going to. You get Jordan Harris and Justin Barron, a couple young defensemen. I fully suspect they will likely spend the full season in the NHL. I don't know that they're both going to be regular, everyday players. Same goes for Caden Gooley. I'm not sure about Gooley. He might have to do a little bit of time in the American Hockey League as well. I think all three of those young they're all going to get NHL time this year. I just don't know how much, if they're all going to be full-time. That's a lot of young and a lot of youth defensemen in the lineup at one time. Of course, they have some vets in there as well. You got Matt Matheson, who was recently acquired. Of course, you get Chris Weidman, you get David Savard, you get Joel Edmondson. So there's not really room, barring injuries, for all these guys to play every day. So I think we're going to probably see a bit of a rotation and see how a lot of these guys fare. But they will definitely get some NHL action, and I do expect them to contribute. You get Caden Primo, who's fresh off a 3-year, one-way contract extension. Although I don't know that he's going to see a ton of NHL time, I still expect him to be the main starter with the Laval Rocket. Even though he's got a one-way contract, it doesn't really mean anything. He's still waivers exempt, which means they can still place him in the minors without going through waivers. There is no risk to lose him. So therefore, what's the rush, right? At the same time, you have Jake Allen, you have Samuel Montembeault. They're likely going to be the NHL duo unless there's injuries or one of them's really doing especially poor. I don't know that Primo's going to get a lot of opportunity. I do think he'll probably play some, but I still think he'll be considered the third string guy for the full season. Some other rookies that we could see, but I wouldn't expect to see a lot of, would be the guys like Yasiel Ylonen, Jan Mysak, Riley Kidney, Joshua Waugh, Philip Masar. I don't know if we'll see any of those guys. Some of them could end up back in junior, or the American Hockey League as well. But there's certainly some key prospects that, regardless of where they play, that they're certainly players that we want to keep an eye on. It could have a future impact on the Montreal Canadiens in the not-too-distant future. So with all that said, what kind of a lineup are we projecting for the Canadiens this year? Certainly, like I said, your top line is definitely going to be a combo of Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. I would suspect that we're probably going to see Caulfield play on the left and Josh Anderson play on the right. I think it's fair to say Josh Anderson's probably your top right winger. They might go with a different setup, but to me, they did play a fair bit last year together, and I think he's a good complement for the smaller, skilled Suzuki and Caulfield. He's a big, strong power forward who can help create a little bit of space for them. So to me, that makes sense. We'll see. You could see a second line that might have a combination of maybe Dvorak, Hoffman, Dadonov. I do suspect guys like, all three of them, to be honest, are potential trade pieces. They're all players that have been mentioned in the rumor mill. Dadonov's only has 1 year on his contract. I would suspect that he could be a deadline acquisition for a potential team. Dvorak and Hoffman's names have both been mentioned in the rumor mill for cost-cutting measures. So we'll see. But of course, I think they're going to have to play well to gain some interest. You got Sean Monahan, very well could be a third liner if he can remain healthy. I suspect your third line could be a combination of Monahan, Gallagher, maybe Doc. I think with the amount of players who can play center in this lineup, Kirby Doc, even though he is a natural center and will eventually likely be a center for the Habs, will likely start on the wing, would be my projection here. So I think that's going to be your third line. And I suspect some options for your fourth line could be a combination. You still got Yoel Armia. You get Jake Evans, Paul Byron, Jonathan Drouin, Pitlick, Pizzetta, and of course, I haven't even gotten to Slavkovsky yet, who was expected to get games early on to see where things stand. So they have way too many forwards. That's why I suspect there to be some change. Now, like I said, this lineup that I'm projecting could be different. Some of these players, it's difficult to say where they go. A guy like Evans and Pizzetta are both kind of, in my opinion, both prime for your fourth line. Evans could move up to the third line if they organize things a little differently here. Guys like Drouin, I know he's ready to play. They need to let him play. He's in the final year of his deal. He's not going to be able to be traded unless there's interest. And to get interest, you have to see some results. So to me, some of these guys need to play. I think there's still some questions around Paul Byron if he's going to be ready to start the year. He may not be on opening night roster. So some of these options are going to look a little different. But at the end of the day, that's at least your top three lines, I think, are going to be fairly accurate. And you get all those other players, I think, kind of battling out for your fourth line. And some of it's going to depend on health. For your decor, you're going to have probably a guy like Matheson and Savard be your top pair. I'm projecting Joel Edmondson and Justin Barron to be your number two. And then a combination of maybe Harris and Weidman be your number three. But as I mentioned earlier, I would be optimistic here that the Habs may even acquire another veteran defenseman to play on the right side, and you may not see guys like Barron and Harris both in the lineup all the time, but as it stands, I think there's a good chance that they're both in your opening night roster, and of course your goaltending tandem will be Jake Allen and Samuel Montembeault, at least to start the season. So there is some rumblings around Jake Allen getting a contract extension, no word on exactly how long. I would suspect it would be 1, maybe 2 years, probably is at the most. Of course, Montembeault got a 2-year deal. Might make sense for them to kind of line up those contracts and reevaluate in 1 or 2 seasons down the road as Primo's getting more and more ready to hopefully take a spot there. And of course, like I said, what are the questions facing his team? Will they get out of the basement? I don't know. I think they're going to be in tough, to be honest, because I think we're going to continue to see a lot of change with this roster. The Canadiens are in a terrible cap situation. They're going to be probably maxed out right to the penny on LTIR, barring any more changes. Of course, Carey Price's contract allows them to go $10 million above the cap, and they're going to need every penny. To have 15, 16 forwards, really counting Slafkovsky, you can only put 12 in your lineup at one time. You don't need 4 extra NHL forwards. You got to trim your roster down anyway. So to me, like I said, I suspect to see a couple more of these guys go, but who's it going to be, right? I would suspect, guys like that are, like whether it be Dvorak, Hoffman, Armia, would be your most likely candidates. Like, players that are on 1-year deals like Dadonov, who they just got, Drouin, they're going to need time to be able to show that they can produce, to get some interest around the league. So hard to say how things are going to go here, but they definitely need to move some forwards out. That's for sure. So I do suspect with more change coming, a fair bit of youth kind of slowly being injected here, and without your all-star goaltender Carey Price being there, I do think they're still going to be near the bottom of the Atlantic Division. I don't know that they're necessarily going to be in the basement. They could very well be a surprise team. I would not be shocked here, because Marty St. Louis had them playing pretty good at the end of the year compared to how they were earlier. They're definitely going to be confident and loose and ready to be offensive, but I don't have a lot of confidence in this blue line. And goaltending, I do like Jake Allen. I think he can certainly provide an opportunity to win most nights, but given the lineup and the defensive abilities, I think the goalies are going to be in tough, and I think the year coming should be better than last year. I just don't know that it's going to be substantially better, and I do think they will be one of the teams again in the running for the top draft sweepstakes for potential future superstar Connor Bedard, who would be an absolute game changer again for this franchise. But that's what I'm expecting from Montreal. That's what the team should look like, and all the changes it's been through. That's your season preview. Let me know where you think the Habs are going to finish for the upcoming season, and any more changes that we're going to see with this roster as we get ready to start the 22-23 season. Of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. There'll be plenty more teams coming with their season previews here in the coming days before the beginning of the season. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.